An enormous dark hole has opened up in the surface of the Sun and is emitting radioactive waves directly towards the Earth. According to scientists' calculations, the size of the hole is equivalent to 60 Earths. This giant void is one of the unprecedented features. The giant dark region, known as the Coronal hole, formed near the star's equator on December 2nd and reached a width of approximately 800,000 kilometers within 24 hours. The dark void has been pointing directly at Earth since December 4th. These temporary holes are formed when the magnetism in the Sun suddenly changes, causing radioactive plasma on the star's upper surface to be ejected into space. This causes radioactive plasma particles to travel through space and reach Earth. In this case, the particles are called a solar storm. How is it different from a sunspot? Coronal holes appear as dark spots because they are cooler and less dense than the surrounding plasma. Sunspots are also darker for the same reason. However, unlike sunspots, coronal holes can only be observed in ultraviolet light. According to experts, radiation currents from coronal holes are much faster than plasma waves from the spots. The last coronal hole observed in the Sun, which appeared in March, caused the strongest geomagnetic storm on Earth in recent years. It is unknown how long the new hole will remain in the star. However, previous coronal holes were found to last longer than 27 days. Activity on the Sun is intensifying. Scientists state that explosions in the Sun will gradually increase and reach their peak within a few years. Because the Sun is currently in an active phase, every 11 years, the star completes a calm or stormy cycle and starts a new one. It is known that the Sun entered its 25th cycle in 2019. The quieter of these cycles, that is, the periods when explosions and spots on the star decrease to a minimum, are called solar minimum. The phases in which sunspots increase and explosions become more frequent are called solar maximum. According to NASA, the star is currently going through an active period. Therefore, the formation of such giant spots on the Sun is an expected situation. Scientists said that the number of spots on the Sun could increase to 115 when the solar maximum phase reaches its peak in 2025. However, the number of spots has already exceeded this figure. According to data, the Sun produced more than 60 spots in June alone. This is the highest number in more than 20 years. Based on this, astronomers believe that this cycle of the Sun will be more active than expected. This cycle appears to be driven by or coincides with the Sun's magnetic cycles, in which the Sun's magnetic field reverses polarity and the north and south poles switch places. This transition will occur at the solar maximum, which is expected to occur in 2024. You probably know about sunspots, solar flares, and coronal mass ejections. A sunspot is a temporary spot on the Sun where magnetic fields become very strong. This results in a cooler, darker freckle on Sun's face. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections, often associated with sunspots, are explosions caused by a giant release of energy that occurs as magnetic field lines break and reconnect. A coronal hole, by contrast, is a large region where the solar magnetic field opens. They cannot be seen in optical light like sunspots. But when we look at ultraviolet wavelengths, we see huge, dark spots that are fainter than their surroundings because they are colder. More powerful solar storms are produced by coronal mass ejections and explosions. The coronal hole is relatively passive. The solar wind is stronger, but it is not actively thrown outward with additional thrust. A violent coronal mass ejection or flare, in contrast, actively ejects material outward. The current hole is quite large, having rotated almost towards the far side of the Sun at the time this video was published. It measures approximately 800,000 kilometers along its longest axis. Jupiter's diameter is approximately 140,000 kilometers. Earth's is 12,742. The hole was pointed toward Earth around December 2nd, and the solar wind hit us throughout December 4th and 5th.